Hello, and welcome to another episode of Northstar Talks Politics. Now, today I'm going to be quite blunt here, and also a little bit of a clickbaity title there. Capitalism is dead. Socialism is the only answer. That's what this title states. A better, more accurate rendition would be capitalism is dying, a slow, painful death, with attempts to fuel fascism to keep the power of the very rich a little bit longer. And there is always pushback, but it's ineffectual. In the wealthy countries, United States, Canada, I suppose this would be best phrased North America here in this outline, Japan, Europe, all the wealthy countries anyways. Some countries in Eastern Europe aren't so wealthy. More and more people struggle to survive. Now, politics in such countries very often being nothing but a fig leaf, a method of control for the rich, a way to misdirect the public, because politicians are bought, sold by billionaires, and they don't really answer to ordinary people, whether it's Americans, Germans, French, it doesn't matter. You have bastards like Macron in France override the will of the public. In Germany, you have a system that's effectively an oligarchy, just the same as the United States, according to statistical analysis of the tendency of lawmakers to actually pass or reject laws based on the views of the public versus the views of billionaires. Same analysis techniques show that Germany is an oligarchy. It's not just the US. That was chosen by the people who did that study because Germany is thought of as being more egalitarian and more of a real democracy. It's not. Well, it was a little less towards the oligarchy statistical model, but very slightly less. It was basically the same as the United States, only a little bit better, not enough to matter. So maybe just as a country that's just as much an oligarchy with better PR. So more and more people struggle to survive, yet the position of the rich is tenuous at best. This plays right into something that's near and dear to me right now, as I struggle to find housing I can afford on SSI in the United States. I'm disabled with long COVID. Got screwed out of SSDI by rules that say that work for university doesn't pay payroll tax. Also, by the way, this same rule affects religious institutions, certain classes of nonprofits and charities that you might be working for a salary. You don't get payroll tax contribution. You don't get work credits. I got disabled at 31. The system is basically meant so you would have to work. If you're disabled at 31, 5 of the last 10 years full time. I'd spent 6 of those years in graduate school. And I had worked during graduate school and some summer jobs, which did pay payroll tax, even though they were often probably less important work than what I did during the academic year for the university. Summer jobs gave me payroll tax. Of course, there was a period right after I finished grad school where I wasn't able during a given calendar year, because that's how you work credits by, to get employment until the calendar year ticked over. I graduated in a rural area. My field was biology. There's not a lot of biotech jobs in the middle of nowhere. And even though I applied to local shitty minimum wage jobs, employers didn't want to hire me because they thought I would just leave there and had the money saved up, which was accurate. That's what I did. They correctly caught that immediately. I was just trying to save up money and leave, and they didn't want to hire me because they wanted someone who would stick around. I'm not a very good liar. So I shouldn't be penalized for being honest, and for having a shitty family who promised they'd help me move and didn't, so I now have money saved to move my own. But yeah, between, on the one hand, summer jobs giving me work credits while I was in school, and the other hand, a brief period of unemployment after finishing grad school, just barely had the work credits, but this rule was bullshit. It was added by Newt Gingrich in the 1990s. In fact, let's see if I can get you something on it. Safe harbor rule. Newt Gingrich. This might not be. Called part of the so-called contract with America. Let's try this. 1994. Or payroll tax exemptions. Gingrich. This might exemptions. Oh yeah, they also added a loophole that allowed pass-through corporations to. All right, this was part of the so-called contract with America. I'm not gonna go dig up the exact thing right now. Sometimes Google or DuckDuckGo. Actually, I might have had more success with Google there, but I pulled up pages on it before. It was a rule out in the 1994 part of the so-called contract with America, where Bill Clinton sat down with Newt Gingrich and gave the Republicans basically everything they wanted. But Bill Clinton was basically a neoliberal. He was the same as the Republicans, maybe not as bad as Reagan, but no better than Bush Sr. or Gingrich. And also a very aggressive foreign policy as well as screwing over Americans domestically. Anyways, so I got screwed, and I'm struggling to find housing in a desperate situation where there's not a lot you can afford an SSI, and YouTube never gives me the views I need to get to where I can supplement income from this yet. I'm still working that. That's all I can do is try and tough through and survive long enough. But housing is hard to afford, and it's one of the things that's become more and more expensive for ordinary Americans. Housing, food, healthcare, all kinds of insurances, and part of the big reason for this is consolidation. Now, there is pushback against this. There's antitrust lawsuits that have been filed against CoStar, Zillow, Zillow, Redfin are both under investigation. Basically, there's three big players in the online rental marketplace. There's three companies that basically own like apartments.com, rent.com, Zillow, obviously, like the website, what do I call Zillow, but also a lot of things you wouldn't need, hot pods, apartments for rent. Like they create a lot of different websites, and they create the illusion that it's multiple different companies, but it isn't. It's all one company a lot of the time with just multiple different websites. And heck, even the ones that are owned by different companies, you look at it and the interface is almost identical. And the prices listed are identical. And, it's not like the same realtors always list at the same prices in every place all the time, because sometimes you can find it differs. And they take different cuts, supposedly, but they've engaged most likely in a price fixing scheme that'll eventually get caught, or that's already been alleged in court but hasn't been proven yet. And they do things to prevent competition, like Zillow and Redfin merging and then forming a deal very soon after. So they merged back in March, and only 2 months later, Redfin's not been sly about generating headlines in 2025. Much attention has been on their deal with Rocket, because they bought like the company does Rocket mortgages or whatever. But that's not necessarily the deal the federal regulators have their eye on. The Federal Trade Commission is investigating Redfin's deal with Zillow to make Zillow the exclusive provider of multifamily listings on Redfin, Rent.com, and ApartmentGuide.com. So they've been pushing off all these to Zillow, which sometimes there's still stuff that hasn't, because this deal hasn't fully gone through. This is on both, and typically, by the way, Zillow has the higher prices. The same place to be listed on Zillow and Rent.com, same thing, and it'll be slightly cheaper on Rent.com. So they're trying to do this to prevent competition and to screw over consumers while pretending it's to make it easier for consumers. It's a syndication agreement, technically. And yeah, it's also raised the advertising costs for apartment managers and such, and small landlords. It's monopoly, and here this is an article about Zillow's taking over entire housing markets. Like this was about what state was this again? This is actually about a particular guy was writing. I think it was about Utah, Salt Lake City area. But he also writes about Phoenix, Arizona, Fort Worth, Las Vegas. This is mostly how Zillow's taken over a lot of the housing market in the U.S. South. And then CoStar, the other company. So really, there's Zillow and Redfin merging into one, and there's CoStar. And these two companies basically own the entire online housing market. And at the same time, you have private equity companies going and buying all the actual apartment units themselves. You have, Blackstone, BlackRock doing their thing. It's one of them gets more of the attention. I think it's Blackstone or BlackRock, but the others are actually involved in the same market as well in a sneakier way. Saw actually a whole thing about that recently. It doesn't help they have such similar names. People probably get them confused. Right. FTC previously bought CoStar Group's purchase of Rent.com and Apartment Guides, which was then later bought by Redfin, which then merged with Zillow. So yeah, they're all consolidating up. And this is partly it's a response to the declining rate of profit, which is something if you Google, by the way, we get right-wing propaganda lies try and deny this fact. Like a freaking Medium blog by an asshole who just denies the statistics, but they're incredibly and cherry picks one graph and claims that Uber-Suchus are misrepresenting. No, they aren't. There's innumerable graphs that show a declining rate of profit. This is from a study that was done by a group of UMass economists that shows this is actually the number of data points, that one that's going up. But world rate of profit is aggregate country level rates. There's multiple different ways it's calculated, but all the ones that go down are basically showing different variations of calculating the same statistic. And the statistics have been very clear on this. This is something that's more just the wealthy countries, so it's a less drastic decline in the global rate of profit because as profits have become tighter in wealthy countries, there's been more globalization, moving factories overseas. But then over time, wages go up in those countries. Automation increases in those countries to make up for the rising wages. And so you see them become less profitable relative to the wealthy countries, less profitable in total. And so you would expect the global rate of profit to decline faster than that in the wealthy countries as a result of globalization. And that's actually exactly what you do see, which is why it's very misleading when you see right-wingers try and point to graphs of the rates in the West, and then they'll usually cherry pick like from here to here or something. They'll pick some of the flatter parts and say, oh, it's not really going down. Even a best fit line shows that even in those areas, there's a decline. It's just more gradual. They'll usually try and only look at whatever country a common ploy is. They'll pick from 1970 to 2010, which is a U-shaped area and might hide the overall declining rate. But yeah, right-wingers never engage with facts, honestly, and then they accuse the left of doing that. But the long-term statistics do show. They show this economist calls long waves. So there's about 19-year cycles where rate of profit will decline, go up within a period. But when you look at longer periods of time, it becomes very obvious. And there have been, large-scale movements like this little U-shape that were due to things like, in this case, Nixon's ending the Bretton Woods global banking system around this point, which temporarily led to a decline in the rate of profit in the U.S. before it started going up because it allowed the U.S. to eventually establish systems in neocolonialism that siphoned a lot more money out of the third world than previous systems. But it set off a global economic recession first, which cut into rate of profit. Here's another statistics. These are different models. The World 1 versus World 2. You can see a decline. Again, a best fit line will show, even though there's this cyclical rise and fall. The long-term tendency is downward. And so what does this lead to? It leads to increasing consolidation as companies to remain profitable try and merge with each other, reducing competition so they can charge consumers higher prices to try and keep up their rate of profit. This drives people out of the upper class. There are fewer people who own companies to the tendency that companies are privately owned, and when they're publicly traded, there's fewer CEOs who often have a privileged position and acquire enough wealth to be capitalists in the sense that they own sometimes millions of dollars in stocks and bonds. Because technically, if an executive owned no capital and just had a very high salary, they would technically still be a worker. They might be what would be called a member of the labor aristocracy, but what actually, they either have to privately own the company or they have to own stocks and bonds independent of their salary to technically be capitalists, but they usually are. And more and more people actually get pushed out of the upper classes, and they become proportionally fewer in number. Even as a group, they control more wealth. So there's consolidation of the rich. People on the bottom struggle to survive more and more. Things like housing, healthcare, as I said, become more expensive. And it's a system that can't go on forever. Whenever you see something that just keeps continuing in a bad direction, you have to ask, how long can this continue? How long until too many Americans become homeless and there's, revolution on people's hands? How long until the attempts fascism to prevent people from using the ballot box to fix things become too egregious? Trump too is not as bad as it gets. We're going to see worse fascism, the 2030s and 2040s. America, it's going to get even more towards picking scapegoats and sometimes literally killing them. You already have Republicans openly talking about euthanasia of the homeless, lethal injections, which is like, what the fuck? But they've said it on Fox News and other right-wing media already. They're putting the idea out there. It's going to get worse. Right now it's immigrants. Later, then it'll be the homeless. As a disabled person, my life is probably eventually going to be in danger from these people. But sooner than that, they're already cutting into Medicaid and food stamps budgets. And there's certainly not going to be changes to fix the broken Social Security system, to fix the way I got cheated at SSDI, or the SSI is not enough to live on. So my life is already in danger from the system, but those dangers are going to get worse when they start trying to kill disabled people for being disabled someday, along with the homeless. You think that's ridiculous? The Nazis did it. History is repeating itself, and they've already openly talked about giving lethal injections to the homeless, which made disabled people become homeless. Another couple counterpoints this. For one, the ruling class has never been very large to begin with. They've always been a tiny minority oppressing the rest of the population, so does it really matter that much if there's half as many billionaires relative to the number of people? Their absolute numbers may go up due to global population growth and due to poorer countries becoming wealthier. But within, say, a first world country, the percent of the population that they make up may be going down. And certainly the number of people who are billionaires and, let's say, over $50 million in net worth is declining proportionally. It's easy to only look at the billionaires, but you got to look at a lot of these people with $500 million, $250 million, even 100. Really, it becomes not very different, except in the amount of political power they hold. But they've never been very numerous to begin with, so even if they decline because of mergers and consolidation, does that really matter? And they may not even decline. People who are pushed out of managerial roles may still find cushy landings, owning stocks and bonds, not actually working for their living. Golden parachutes that allow them to just live off interest the rest of their lives, live off capital gains. Meanwhile, I'm not even allowed to have more than $2,000 and still get SSI when if I can eventually get that stupid processing done. Local Social Security office was giving me bullshit obstacles. I ended up having a congressman involved. Congressperson's office is successfully accelerating that. And I got a doctor for, luckily, medical assessment who seems to actually take their job seriously and probably, or up to them, would say it was disabled. But it's not. It goes to other doctors you'll never meet in an office somewhere who could be absolute shitheads. So even if the case manager is on my side, even if the doctor thinks I'm disabled, who was collecting info at the medical exam, because it's been more than 6 weeks since I've seen, 6 months since I've seen a specialist, because there's nothing you can do for long COVID, so why would I keep seeing them? And they use it as an excuse to do a new appointment. But even if everyone wants to help, the system is designed to fuck people like me over, to not allow good-natured people to actually help. It's an evil system, and even good people can't necessarily do any good within it. So we'll see. But even if I get that, it's going to be a struggle to survive. And it's going to get worse as the housing market gets consolidated for me and tens of millions of other Americans. In fact, over 100 million people worldwide have long COVID now. I mean, let that sink in. It was tens of millions who were struggling with housing costs. But there was this big study that showed over 65 million, but it was underestimating the number. And the number kept rising. And people who had not yet got diagnosed with long COVID became disabled. Based on, trends, it's probably, the real number is probably over 100 million now, but there hasn't been enough follow-up study to confirm this yet. But it's been speculated that it's between 85 and like 110 million. It's probably over 100 now. And it's definitely over 65 million people worldwide have some level of inability to work, at least full-time. Many can work part-time, but some can't work really at all, like me, or can only work a very limited number of part-time hours, like 2 a week, 3 a week, like 1, 2, 3 hour shift a week I could pull up. That wouldn't pay the rent. Even with my post-exertion ways, that would give me enough time to cover from, because I get post-exertion ways even going out to appointments. Anyways, so the shrinking of the ruling class may not be that relevant. History shows that the ruling class managed to oppress the masses far worse than the past. I mean, you can look at anything from the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, which is obviously before capitalism, but still authoritarian oppression of the working masses by a few ruling elites. You can look at Industrial Revolution, 1800s, the Victorian era. It's been worse before. This is not as bad as it gets, and so maybe the system will remain stable, but it's going to suck. However, when the system was more stable in the past under capitalism, at least the rate of profit was much, much higher, which meant if you got this sort of bullshit abundance thinking, which, by the way, abundance is the newest buzzword load of crap that the Democrats are pushing, where you have neoliberals trying to pull the Democratic Party further to the right, which they will always do. They always chase the Republicans. Republicans go into fascism, and Democrats will chase them. Republicans go deeper into fascism, and the Democrats chase them further. It's ratchet effect so that the right-wing changes never get undone. This is a problem with the two-party system. It's not real democracy. You need more than two parties to have a functional democracy, and you need billionaires to not be able to buy politicians. And neither of those changes are going to come to the United States. It's probably going to collapse eventually. But you can't just, cut social expenses, tighten belt, increase investments, and expect it to pay off quickly, because as the rate of profit falls, it means that you have to invest more money to get a certain profit, or alternatively, let me put it this way, if you put aside a certain amount of money and invest it, the amount of time till it's paid for itself is much longer than the past, which makes it less stable to temporary pain for long-term gain, because the long-term gain is less than before, especially with the way compound interest works. If doubling time is longer, what might have been put aside a little money make people suffer a little, and the GDP will have grown 5 times that amount of money in 5 decades. Now it'll have only grown twice that amount, or 1.5 times. It's not a sustainable situation to keep squeezing ordinary people, and yet that's what's being done. And so, at the same time, we have the climate collapsing, which is not a problem in the past either, due to habitat destruction, rampant CO2 overproduction, and overpopulation, broadly speaking. We are in for very, very rough 22nd century at the rate we're going, and rough later half of the 21st century. It's 2025. We're entering the second quarter of the 21st century, and it's unclear if the United States will even make it to past 2050. uh, so, long term, this is a dying system, and socialism is the only answer. By socialism, I'll leave you with this. I don't mean social democracy. You get assholes like Bernie Sanders who go out there, and the media supports this because it's in their interest to do so, call themselves socialists, and they're not socialists. They're social democrats. They want to just tax the rich. And the media allows them to call up the term because if they can make it seem like that's socialism, then actual socialism doesn't have a place in the discussion. Socialism would be, if you're looking on YouTube, stuff that you might see Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist who's taught at UMass Amherst, which UMass Amherst has a cadre of Marxist economists because Harvard purged all their Marxist economists like 70s or 90s or something. Basically, political motivated purge, because I think it was the early 90s. There was a political motivated purge when it was the 80s. That's right, late 80s by basically the billionaire board of trustee assholes at Harvard. They didn't like that there were economists who actually taught Marxist economics, and this has been a long-term thing throughout the West of trying to purge such people, suppress views they don't like, and then claim it's not credible, and then say, look, there's no economists who teach this, so there's no economists because you've been actively purging them. So yes, this is a minority view. It's a minority view, not because the statistics don't back it, but because you've been actively getting people fired who teach it. That by you, I mean the billionaires have. And the people on the board of trustees who are inevitably very, very wealthy individuals. So there's, and there's also like think tanks that put pressure on universities as well to continue this and to advance the careers of right-wing economists so that they can make it seem like, by giving them awards and stuff like they're smarter than they actually are and have them outcompete left-wing economists. So, particularly Marxist ones who are almost never get awards that they deserve. But yeah, UMass Amherst to this day still has some old Marxist economists. They don't really hire new ones anymore, but they let the ones that they took from Harvard continue. So until they all die of old age, because a lot of them are tenured, they'll still be there putting out occasional bits of data, even if no one really listens to them in the media or anything. But they exist, and they are speaking truth to power, even if no one's listening. And that is where one of these studies, specifically this one, came from. This was by a group at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. They made it. This is actually a working paper, but working papers in some cases can be just because you haven't found a journal published something yet, and it's hard to get ideas like this published, even if the statistics are quite credible. It's very dense stuff. Although I've looked through it some to really understand it with my long COVID, would take weeks and weeks and weeks to thoroughly understand this because my intellectual abilities are impaired with this disease. It doesn't stop the system from, just SSI and saying, and getting shitty bureaucrats, like when there was a different social security office that was not transferring my files and still screwing with me some other stuff in that same city. That it's a complicated thing. It's a bit of parochialism. It's a bit of I'm not going to go into all the reasons why there's resentment between different cities, but I didn't cause it, and they're not treating me well. People out of that particular city finding another office. There's so many government offices that run out of it. It's a small city, not a big one. But anyways, as I sit here and struggle to survive, there are people who say, oh, maybe you just have to work to it. I can't work, assholes. I get exhausted just going to a medical appointment for an hour or sitting and recording this for half hour. I'm already getting lightheaded. I need to go lie down. So I wish you folks the best. Take care of each other. Be kind yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you on. Adieu.